Masterpiece. In modern use, a masterpiece is a creation in any area of the arts that has been given much critical praise, especially one that is considered the greatest work of a person's career or to a work of outstanding creativity, skill, profundity, or workmanship. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a modern masterpiece of survival horror. It is flawed, especially when judging it as a remake of its source material, and I'm not going to ignore those flaws. I'm gonna get into the minor to large problems that exist in this game, but in the aspects that I think matter the most in the genre, RE2 Remake delivers excellently. I hope we all agree on the first point, it's a great horror experience. It is creepy, it is lonely, it is oppressive. It's faithful to the late 90s setting without pandering to nostalgia like the last movie did with its 90s radio tunes. It's just a little crush. Oh, Jesus, let's not even get into that movie. I want to spend some time just talking about the locations of RE2 Remake. The game's central location, the Raccoon City Police Department, is a masterclass in how to update a classic map. The original RPD is as iconic as the Spencer Mansion from RE1, and just like how the 2002 GameCube remake of RE1 expanded on the original maps with believable and interesting additions like the garden, the underground area and the story of Lisa Trevor, the cabin in the woods, and a completely redesigned basement pool section, RE2 Remake keeps the police station's iconic layout while adding a third floor that feels like a very natural extension of the original game's map, as well as a completely redesigned library and new connectivity that provides interesting navigation options and keeps exploration fresh for returning veterans. If you play the original a bunch, your instinct is to go west in the RPD, but it's locked this time around, and you end up going to the East Hall first, which you didn't see for a good amount of time in the original. It sends a clear message that this may be the same place, but you're still gonna have to figure it out. When you open the west side of the RPD and approach the liquor hallway, you notice that the liquor does not run across the window like he does in the original. So is he gonna appear in this hallway? No, he's not. But if you're looking at your surroundings, you'll see his scratches on the wall. He's in the building somewhere. Not knowing where he's gonna be makes his introduction scary all over again, as you make it to the new third floor of the RPD and see him run across the window there. Finally meeting the liquor is also a wonderful moment because they use the open window and gusts of wind and rain not only to establish a creepy mood, but also to distract you from seeing the liquor on the ceiling. As you approach the window to inspect, suddenly the liquor's tongue flies out and starts devouring a corpse in front of you. It's a great way to reintroduce a classic enemy. Another excellent change is the second floor library. RE2's library was a very simple room where nothing happened. You run up the stairs and fall through the floor, you have a puzzle where you just look at the picture and match the simple pattern, clicking the buttons to order the shelves. It's not very interesting. RE2 Remake turns this space into so much more. First, it's a combat space, early in the game when you're quite underpowered. If you take on all these zombies the first time you're here, it might not go well. There's a side door that leads to a connecting hallway that's locked from the other side, meaning you could end up getting swarmed by zombies as they burst through the door. The staircase can be used as a choke point while shooting, and there's a ladder to escape danger. It's a dynamic space. It's a really good early game combat space, with a puzzle item that you might overlook if you're not careful, and if you never pick it up, you'll miss a powerful weapon later on. And the puzzle aspect of this room has been changed into a backtracking mission. You try to run to the door at the top and fall through the floor just like in the original. Classic jump scare, which alerts a zombie that was eating. Now to get to the door at the top, there's 4 bookshelves that have to be put together to create a walking path upstairs. One of these shelves can't be moved without a device found later, but moving some of the shelves now will create an advantage for when you solve it later under the pressure of Mr. X, and you'll find some early handgun bullets while you're at it. When you return to the library after triggering the appearance of Mr. X, the library becomes one of the central points of strategy and survival. Trying to move all the shelves while Mr. X is in the room is tense and creates opportunities for planning your tactics upon replaying the game. The library is a great example of how RE2 Remake is able to take some of the original's more underwhelming aspects and intelligently turn them into something fun and more complex. The basement, which was originally a pretty mediocre point of exploration with a few dogs running around, though still very cool in its atmosphere, now adds an exciting and claustrophobic dog chase after reactivating the power system. The original sewer section, which is honestly pretty forgettable as you just walk down a few water-filled corridors and insert some medallions to open a door, is now a multi-level puzzle-like environment with a large emphasis on map comprehension, some of the most intense combat encounters in the game, like the G-monsters in the sewage, and 2 solid puzzles, the first being the chess pieces to open gates, and the second using the chess pieces to open the sewer exit, which is the best puzzle in the game. A truly classic survival horror puzzle based on smart riddles and placing the pieces in the right order. It allows you to make mistakes, but it doesn't leave you feeling screwed or lost. The B-scenario version of this puzzle is even better. There's a lot I like about the sewer level, but there's also some things I don't. I just praised it for really requiring you to look at your map. I think that's great. The problem comes from the fact that it can be really awkward to figure out how the different levels relate to each other. Connecting points like stairways and especially drainage areas are hard to relate spatially. Having a giant 3-level area that you're regularly sliding up and down without a 3D map to look at can lead to a lot of unnecessary confusion, and I'm sure a lot of people got frustrated by this entire area. It being really dark doesn't help either. The sewers is a map I've come to appreciate more on repeat playthroughs, now that I've figured it out, but I wouldn't say it was a map that was fun to figure out, and that's a big mark against it. If someone says they think the sewers is a crappy map, no pun intended, I completely understand why. And then there's the laboratory. I'm 50-50 on this one. I think it looks pretty cool. The opening lobby really sets the mood. I love seeing the staff kitchen and cafeteria. It makes it feel like a real place. The liquor encounter in the dark is top-notch and terrifying. The security puzzles are fun to put together. The chemical puzzle is a great little exercise in math and measurement. And there's just something about this soundwave device that I find so satisfying. Something about the tones, they're so soothing. I enjoy it every time. I love the reinvention of the plant monsters, making them a one-hit kill enemy that you don't dare screw around with. They emphasize precision aiming to repeatedly stun them and then put them down if you don't want to empty loads of resources into them. They make the flamethrower feel like a much more appropriate part of your arsenal, whereas in the original it felt kinda like an afterthought. And since the plants are so threatening, you'll want to have some self-defense weapons on you, like knives or grenades, to save yourself from getting insta-killed and returning back to your last save. That puts additional pressure on your inventory space, which is always a good thing in a survival horror game like this. These plants were just pathetic in the original, utterly forgettable. This time around, running around carelessly could end up with you getting your head bitten off after running into one of these guys around a corner. They add a unique sense of tension to the late game that's very welcome. Some might think their insta-kill ability is bullshit, but I think it's a welcome addition. Hunters in Resident Evil 1 were bullshit too. They could lunge at you from across the room and take your head off in one swipe, even if you were at high health. It made you respect and fear them like nothing else. It mixed up the combat at the halfway point and made you feel a new level of nervousness. I'm not saying I want a bunch of enemies with that ability, but having one that appears here and there or in certain locations, it adds a lot. I said that I'm 50-50 on the laboratory, and it's for 2 reasons. 1, I think it should have been longer, with a whole other section to explore. And 2, the largest reason, I think I just have a preference for the atmosphere of the original lab. There's something about the mood of the cold, metallic location that comes across as much more haunting than the remakes. While I do praise the mood of RE2 Remake in general, it definitely falters in a few places. The largest misstep, in my opinion, is the game's intro. RE2 Original really takes its time in getting started. Well, not exactly. It starts right there in the street, having to survive a bunch of zombies with tank controls that a lot of people weren't used to when they played the game the first time. I've always thought that was a mistake. Tank controls take time to understand and use appropriately. You shouldn't start a game with tank controls in a room surrounded by zombies. RE1 got it right by letting you navigate the dining room first and adjust to the camera changes. I don't really know where else to mention this bit, but since I just talked about the original's presentation, I'll always be a fan of the classic fixed camera angles. But I gotta say, it's also really nice to be able to freely walk around these modern interpretations of classic locations and just look at everything. There's some locations in the original that I wouldn't call important, but because of the way they're framed in the fixed camera, they've always stuck with me, like the rotating platform in the sewers. I love being able to see them like this in a fully 3D space with a controllable camera. Anyway, RE2 Remake remedies the original's starting room issues by starting in a gas station instead, upon entering Raccoon City, presenting a one-on-one zombie encounter so you can adjust to the targeting and see how zombies react to gunshots, and then you take control after the car crash in the streets. Starting this way is one of my favorite changes in the remake because it establishes the seriousness of the danger so much more effectively and intimately. I'll bet the majority of players got bit at least once by the first zombie, especially if you started on hardcore. After the crash, you're put into the streets with the zombies like the original. To compensate for the fact that many players are definitely not ready to deal with this many enemies and they don't even have enough ammo to do so, enemy damage is reduced to allow you to get hit several times as you're trying to avoid zombies and make your way through town. This is where the big misstep in setting the mood of the opening occurs. RE2 Original makes the journey to the police station a mini adventure of its own. The opening street encounter leads to the gun shop, to the back alley and the basketball court, up and around the stairs and down to another area, into the large open street with the dead guy in the foreground, up into the bus for a claustrophobic encounter, and then you enter the side gate of the police station, crossing the garden or taking the stairs through the underpass, ultimately leading to the iconic main entrance, which the new movie actually constructed. Nice, they got one thing right. All of this stuff is gone in the remake. You're dumped out onto the street and all you do is run forward, down a little back walkway area, and bam, you're right there at the police station, in less than a minute. Coming in as a fan of the original, this is a change I find very off-putting. There's no build-up, you just show up right away. Much like how in the original Resident Evil 3, the threat of the nemesis is slowly established through dialogue, allowing the tension to build. And in the remake, Nemesis just barges into your apartment with no context for the player to appreciate what's happening. It's rushed, it's sloppy, and I hate that both games really botched these elements. Some of these opening locations are actually found in Claire's playthrough, as you approach the orphanage, and that's really cool. You have the stairs and the trash can you hop over, the bus is out there and used in a dog encounter. I like that it's there, but it doesn't change the fact that these things not being in the intro ends up hurting the pacing of the opening. And while I do think they pretty much nailed the overall mood of this game and its creepiness, another aspect that really disappoints me is the darkness of the police station. Now, these spaces being dimly lit certainly enhances the horror in many situations. Slowly walking by a liquor in the dark while a zombie stumbles towards you is wonderfully tense. The third floor storage room and the first floor east hallway being really dark helps set a menacing tone for this game. But when you look at the original game, the police station is a brightly lit environment. The whole game is really. The whole original trilogy, come to think of it. These were not dark games in terms of lighting. The RPD in particular was full of vibrant colors and beautiful rooms, perfectly framed by classic fixed camera angles. I never actually found RE2 Original to be a very scary game, certainly not the way that RE1 was scary. The scariness is probably a key factor for those that prefer the first game to the second. RE2 Remake goes hard on the dark lighting and creepy mood, and it works. It's a much scarier game than the original in several ways. I just personally miss seeing these incredible locations in decent lighting. There's a moment in the beginning where you can enter the meeting room and there's a light switch, and this just doesn't happen anywhere else in the RPD except for a save room later on. We get a few nicely lit rooms in the library, the main lobby, the STARS office, and spending so much time in the darkness makes these brightly lit rooms stand out more. But it would have been great to have a few more optional light switches in some of these spaces. Maybe the East office, I always liked that room in the original. Having lights you can switch on and off could have led to some scary moments where suddenly the lights go off in a room you've already lit up. The color of the game overall is another one of my personal biggest issues. Taking such a colorful game and not only making it much darker but also desaturated, I think was a huge mistake. You see the footage that I'm showing? See how good it looks? Yeah, that's because this whole time I'm playing on PC with a reshade mod that I customized to restore the color they inexplicably sucked out of the image. This is how the game actually looks, and it's so ugly. It's one of the few things that RE3 Remake did better. They brought back the color a little bit. RE2 Remake is just so drab looking, and it has the effect of making the location variety have less of an impact as you explore the game. The desaturated color and darkness definitely play a part in making the sewers frustrating to figure out. You spend a lot of time in a mostly dark police station, and then down in a dark basement, and then you end up in the sewers for several hours wandering around lost in the dark. It's a weird thing to criticize in a horror game, I know, and possibly I wouldn't if I weren't such a fan of the original and the way it looks. The lack of music plays a big part in bringing down the atmosphere too, as the wonderful themes set for every room have been thrown out in favor of general ambience and silence, which is good for establishing dread, but eventually you get numb to it. When it's always quiet, the quiet eventually stops creating tension. Thankfully, there's an option to play the original game's soundtrack, which is 100% the way to play the game, but they charge for it. Without the music, there's just nothing to establish different moods. I'm gonna show you an example of just how much mood is lost by having no music.
Cable car. Interesting. Where'd she go?
Moving on from level design and atmosphere, common enemies and bosses are improved across the board. I already mentioned the plants and how much I like them. The dogs are aggressive, deadly, and at times unpredictable. The lickers are insanely dangerous and feel like a much more dynamic evolution of the original concept, with very tense moments of trying to navigate around them quietly. If you run haphazardly into a room where they are, you could instantly put yourself into a critical health situation. I really like the third floor storage room where an explosion causes the bookshelf to block the door and you're ambushed by a licker that comes through a hole in the ceiling. If you don't kill him and you don't get the bookshelf off the door, you'll run to the back door. Just when you think you're safe, the licker crawls back into the hole in the ceiling and pops out right where you are. Just getting out of the room doesn't make you safe. Boss fights are actually filled with enjoyable combat and strategy as opposed to the original where most of them were just plant yourself in one spot and shoot a few times and then walk back and do it again. There were exceptions. Birkin Phase 4 in dog form could screw you up, sure, but the boss fights of the original were hardly remembered for their gameplay, more for the physical design of the monster and how cool it was to see a single creature mutate as you progressed. These original games were never about the combat. The remake's over-the-shoulder camera allows for better combat, but with a change in camera style, you're gonna gain some things and lose others. Thanks to the remake's over-the-shoulder camera style, precision shooting plays a large part in taking down various bosses. Shooting Birkin's glowing eye and navigating the labyrinthian design of the combat area is great. It's fun and satisfying to use different grenade types to stun bosses and find a good spot to unload on him. Boss fights can certainly be frustrating at times. The fight with Birkin using the shipping container comes to mind, but I still like it. I like boss fights with puzzle elements to them. Having to stun him and trigger the container to come knock him off the platform is a fun way to mix up boss encounters, and I wish there were more things like that in the game. More combat situations with puzzle elements instead of just brute force. As for the zombies, I know some people don't like what they did with them, making them bullet sponges that can rarely be easily headshot with the pistols. Is it immersion breaking? Yeah, I'd say it is, but on a strictly gameplay level, it's a great change. It emphasizes your power weapons more, increasing weapon variety as you pull out a shotgun to insta-kill zombies in your path, with your pistol remaining as a solid option for long-distance play and ammo conservation of your power weapons, long into the game. Having zombies able to tank pistol headshots allows them to create stressful, dangerous encounters with just 2 or 3 zombies in a tight space, instead of having to rely on hordes of them overwhelming you. And that's a huge factor in this game not feeling like an action horror game instead of survival horror. Every time you die, the game forces you to watch your character get brutally killed, and every time it makes me feel so much worse about my death, putting my head in my hands in shame, listening to myself get torn apart. Very effective. So I want to get into the gameplay, but first I'll address what is a lot of fans' main issues with this remake: cut content and character changes. There's no spiders, no giant moth, the alligator sequence is lame and feels like an afterthought, which it probably was, but to be honest, can anyone really say the alligator part was cool in the original? You just trigger his appearance, walk back and let him meet the gas canister and shoot it. It's not really anything but a set piece. I always thought it was kinda dumb and never felt like a fight anyway, so I don't personally have a problem with it being a short QTE sequence. It isn't really an upgrade, but I wouldn't call it a downgrade either. The police chief has been changed from cool-talking, horrible murderer to raging psycho stalking a little girl in an orphanage. The chief was originally playing it off like he was normal. He lied about not being responsible for the mayor's daughter's death, and you discovered his true nature through the notes you picked up later, until finally coming face to face with his violent side right before his death. The remake has him being awful and pointing a gun at you from the moment you meet him, and I think that makes him a less interesting character. Leon and Claire feel, for the most part, faithful to their original versions. Leon is kind, brave, naive, and wanting to do the right thing. Claire is smart, resourceful, determined, caring, and sassy. They're not one-to-one copies, but they're similar enough to be okay by me. I'll always prefer the originals though, especially Claire. I still don't like the scrunched face look of Leon and Claire. I think they just look weird, but at least the main characters weren't humiliated and butchered the way Jill was in the RE3 remake. But that's a story best left for another video, which I already did, twice. Many of you already saw. I like Leon and Claire individually, but I think there should have been a lot more interaction between them. This is their story, and playing them individually, it's really easy to forget about your partner all the way to the end, because they don't talk to each other. The original was definitely better about this, having Claire come across Leon in the hallway after he's wounded, and having several moments of radio contact.
Do you read me, Claire? We now have access to the back of the parking lot.
Got it.
I'm getting out of here and heading to the sewer. Can you meet me there?
I'm on my way.
The character they really got right is Ada. She definitely looks good, and when she speaks, she feels like the most real of anyone in the game. Her side mission has been drastically improved, from just running through dogs and pushing some boxes, to solving electric pathway puzzles with a hacking tool under pressure of zombies that you don't have enough bullets to kill, and escaping Mr. X. It's not the best, but it's definitely better. She even gets a nice dramatic moment where Annette pushes her off the platform and she suffers a terrible leg injury. Definitely more effective than the original. Leon sees her when he first arrives at the sewer, and so his following actions are driven by his need to help her, instead of just randomly coming across her killing an alligator and now they're together again. I gotta say though, the way they handled Marvin's death is monumentally bad. They simultaneously make me care more about him by giving him more dialogue in several cutscenes, and make me care less about him dying. The original had that corny transformation scene where you unlock the room he's in and he transforms in front of you, and the remake just has him come after you like any other zombie late in the game. No cutscene or anything. And it's just like, oh, okay, Marvin is dead. Alright, I kinda forgot about him anyway. It really sucks. I guess they thought it would be more real or immersive, but it fails. Maybe they could have had you maintain some kind of radio contact with him leading up to the reveal. However, character changes and missing enemies are certainly not the biggest issue with RE2 Remake as a remake. It's the lazily assembled B scenario. Maybe lazy isn't the right word, it feels lazy, but maybe I should say hastily assembled instead. Many of you probably don't know this, but in 2018, it was announced that there would be no B scenario at all. That's why Claire and Leon's campaigns branch off into different paths more, leading to Leon fighting Mr. X at the end, who was originally only present in the original game's B scenario, and Claire fighting Birkin's Phase 4 on the train platform with the minigun. They likely expected a fully realized B scenario to simply be too much of an undertaking and beyond their budget, so instead they tried to make the single scenario more varied between the two playable characters. Well, this announcement did not go over well, as the original's B-scenario zapping system was one of its most unique and exciting features. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how it worked, I'll try to briefly summarize. When the car crashes in the original, the character you pick changes whether the car crashes in the front or the back, to allow each character to start in the same place on the street. The remake also does this, that's why Leon or Claire both start in the same place despite sitting on different sides of the car. In the original B scenario, say if you play Claire B, you actually get out on the opposite side and take other streets towards the police station. You enter through a different door behind the RPD, and item locations are mixed up to keep the gameplay fresh. The remake also does this, though instead of moving through another street, which they apparently didn't want to model simply for this rushed B scenario, your character starts in the outside garden and runs directly to the RPD side door, instead of coming through the back. Both B scenarios, original and remake, provide changes in starting location, items, and enemy encounters. But what made the original B scenario so compelling was that it honestly felt like you were experiencing what the other character was doing while you were playing the first time around. Not in every aspect, you still have to solve a lot of the same puzzles, it's still the same game, it's not super consistent. Just because Leon unlocked every door and killed every zombie doesn't mean B scenario Claire doesn't have to find any keys or shoot anything. You still gotta play, but there are decisions you can make that impact the other character's B scenario. If you pick up the submachine gun and the inventory pack, those items won't be there for the other character in the B scenario playthrough. There was a laboratory passcode that you could get in your first playthrough, but the door requires 2 codes. So in the B scenario playthrough, you can actually open that doorway and gain access to a space you couldn't get to before. And it's only achievable if you got the code in the A scenario first. Getting to the train platform in Scenario A just lets you go down to the lab, and in Scenario B, that platform is already down, so you have to head into the engineering room and call it back up, leading to an ambush by Mr. X. Most importantly, the main villain of the game, William Birkin, is encountered during different phases. You know that first fight in the remake where he looks like he's really struggling with his humanity in the early stages of mutation and he's swinging the pipe? That version is not seen in the original A scenario. Your first boss fight is with the creature that hatches out of Ben the journalist, implanted in him by Birkin. It grows into the Lesser G monster, and that is your first boss fight. The monster was repurposed to be used as a recurring enemy type in the remake sewers, which was a far better way to use it because it was always a really interesting design visually, but the original fight sucked. So in the original, you don't actually encounter William Birkin until after you've met Annette and hear the story about what happened to him. He appears on the train platform going down into the laboratory, pretty late into the game honestly. And he looks like this, he's already far into his mutation. This version is seen in the B scenario because you don't encounter the Lesser G monster since the other player already killed it. Now, I actually like this change. I think it's much better to encounter Phase 1 Birkin in the A scenario earlier in the game. It helps build him up through the entire game as the main monster, instead of leaving his first appearance till near the end. I'm just using his appearance to illustrate the differences in the original scenarios here. Encountering different phases of William Birkin across the scenarios makes them feel complementary, giving the full experience of the story. And that's the main place where the remake's B scenario completely fails. A scenario or B scenario, you have the same boss fights. A scenario Leon and B scenario Claire fight William Birkin in the same phases, encounter Annette Birkin in the same cutscene with the acid thrown at Birkin, and it just doesn't work. It's super disappointing. The whole feeling of, I can't wait to run the B scenario to see what the other character experienced, is ruined once you realize that you're seeing the same thing you would have seen if you played that character's A scenario. It makes sense why they did it this way if you realize that they never planned a B scenario in the first place and only did it in response to backlash. They never planned to have different stages of boss encounters, so by that time it was too late. They couldn't do that without pushing the game back another year or more to make new locations and new boss fights. So there's a reason for it, but it really sucks. And it's probably the main reason why RE2 Remake will never surpass the original's greatness in the eyes of a lot of old school fans, regardless of how solid so many other aspects are and how improved and modernized the gameplay is. There are things I appreciate in the B scenario. Combat tends to be more intense, with monsters now able to enter previously safe zones. The remixed puzzles are very much appreciated. I like that Mr. X is already walking around when you arrive, even if it's way too soon. I think Claire's new revolver is really fun. I love that they bring back the original game's first liquor reveal with the west side window. These are really nice gestures, but the continuity issues are so glaring that it distracts from whatever positive things you can say about it. I mean, Scenario A Leon fights Mr. X at the end, and in Scenario B, Claire sees Mr. X die at the halfway point like she does in her A scenario. It makes no sense. And I'm sure there's going to be someone defending this too. I've interacted with enough wackos in these years on YouTube to know that there's someone who will defend this mediocrity saying, well, to be fair, they don't call it a B scenario, they call it second run, so it's not really fair to compare it to the original game's B scenario. Oh yeah, then why do they have you getting out of the car on the opposite side to create the interaction at the fence, suggesting that this is the other side of the same story? This is the B scenario, and it's all wrong, simple as that. The original B scenario gave an explanation for the helicopter crash as well. There was a cop trying to get evacuated and he gets attacked by zombies, causing him to fire wildly and he hits the pilot. You see this when you come through the back entrance to the RPD, but only in the B scenario. The remake just leaves out these kinds of details, and it's sad. So, the gameplay, let's get to it. And the majority of my comments on the gameplay comes from the hardcore difficulty setting, which is the only way to judge this game as a survival horror veteran. I don't mean to crap on the standard difficulty or casual players new to the franchise. I think standard provides a good experience for people who aren't ready to play by all the rules of classic survival horror, and if your aim sucks. But hardcore doesn't just raise enemy damage, it has fewer inventory expansions that massively impact the early game, and it has no checkpoints, requiring you to find limited ink ribbons to save at typewriters, so you have to make smart decisions about when to save and how many risks you're gonna take. So yeah, hardcore mode mentality only from here on. I am a man that tends to value gameplay over everything else. I fell in love with Resident Evil 1 not just because of the creepy atmosphere and the cool cinematic presentation of the world through fixed camera, but because it was so damn fun to play. No game before that had made me feel so tense. Resident Evil 1, for a lot of kids growing up in the 90s, was the first game to ever ask them to be careful about which enemies they killed. My personal background was Twisted Metal, Super Mario, Doom and Duke Nukem, Earthworm Jim, Streets of Rage, Mortal Kombat, Contra. I never went around trying to scavenge for resources, managing tight inventory space, pulling out a map to plan my route, and solving puzzles. It was a brand new kind of experience for me. And after RE1's success, we saw that kind of gameplay incorporated and morphed around in various other horror titles to come out in the following years, most famously in Resident Evil's sister series, the psychological horror title Silent Hill. I absolutely adore the classic survival horror formula, and it's sad to see it slip away through the decades. Yes, RE4 was one of the biggest games of all time, but it left behind a lot of the survival horror genre tropes for a more streamlined linear action game, which is great in its own right, it just won't satisfy you if you want that classic experience. Dead Space further took us into this action horror direction with little to no map exploration needed, and RE4's system of rewarding players with resources for killing them, instead of killing enemies being a choice between losing resources or risking your health by avoiding them. For a long time, I just didn't play anything that I would consider to be an actual survival horror game, regardless of developers calling their game survival horror when it's not. Resident Evil went further and further into action schlock to where you wouldn't even call them horror games anymore. Then RE7 came out with a surprising return to slow-paced survival horror gameplay, and it was refreshing. It's not a perfect game, I wouldn't even call it a great game, it quickly wears out its welcome for me, but that first section in the house feels like classic Resident Evil to me. With the RE2 Remake, we proved to the world that classic 90s style survival horror gameplay absolutely has a place in today's gaming industry. RE2 Remake doesn't just take the original setting and turn it into a linear action-focused free-for-all with limitless inventory space, or a cinematic Sony-style adventure game, or stuff it full of unnecessary RPG mechanics and loot hunting. No, it sticks to the fundamentals that made the original so beloved by its fans. Inventory space is very limited. If you just pick up everything you see, you'll be screwed. You'll backtrack to pick up something you want to save for later. You'll sit there thinking about if you want to take 1 or maybe 2 health items with you, knowing that an extra inventory slot could mean that you can't pick up an important puzzle item later or some life-saving ammo. You're always making decisions. Kill this licker now, or leave it alive and possibly have to deal with it if Mr. X finds you in this room later. Finding ink ribbons to manually save, and getting sent back to that save point when you die, no matter how much progress you made. Due to high enemy HP and at times unpredictable movement, missing shots and wasting ammo becomes a large concern on your first playthrough, leading to more desperate and focused exploration looking for important resources. You're going to be pulling out the map a lot, trying to remember where you want to go, and which enemies you left alive so you can plan for them. It is excellent. So many moments of chaos as one bad decision leads you to losing more than half your health, and you're left cursing at yourself for the next 5 minutes, wondering if you should just push on or reload your save and go back 20 minutes. That's the essence of a survival horror game, and RE2 Remake nails it. Several areas of the game are optional, like the interrogation room, which you could completely overlook if you're not checking your map. And if you do overlook it, you won't pick up the crucial magnum for Leon, or the submachine gun for Claire. And then in the sewer, there's a way to return to the RPD a 3rd time, strictly to unlock an upgrade and develop a photo in the dark room that shows you a secret location for extra ammo. Majority forced exploration with occasional optional exploration is absolutely the right structure for Resident Evil. The inclusion of boarding up windows also adds an interesting level of strategy to your backtracking and inventory management, because if you want to board up a lot of windows, that takes up space. You don't have enough boards to cover every window, so you'll have to decide which wing of the RPD you want to board up to protect it from a future invasion, and this has the potential to play a huge role later. Just when things might be getting formulaic, the unkillable Mr. X appears and throws a wrench into your whole game plan. He paces around the RPD hunting you. Suddenly, a single gunshot can cause him to locate you, and now you've got to move to lose him or deal with him head on. The presence of Mr. X causes so many problems for your navigation because you'll look at your map and think, okay, the best way to get to where I'm going is through this hallway. And then you'll get to that hallway and he's already there. You start running from him in a panic and end up in a place you didn't plan to go to, and now you're dealing with other enemies you weren't prepared for. It's such a lovely change of pace at the halfway point. Hearing those pounding footsteps lets you know that you are not safe to fire a bullet while he's near, because he could be right around the corner. Mr. X actually leads to what I will boldly call the greatest moment in modern gaming. I'll describe this through the Leon playthrough, which most people experienced first. Okay, here I'm talking directly to a lot of you because I know a lot of you had something very similar to this experience, if not exactly. Returning to the RPD after surviving the dogs in the basement and extinguishing the fire from the crashed helicopter, you trigger the arrival of Mr. X. You spend the next period having him totally screw up your plans. You look at the map and see that the interrogation room is opened by your newly found club key. So you head down the stairs past the zombie banging on the window, use the club key on the door, and grab all the important stuff inside. Exiting the room, the zombie has made its way into the area, but it's just one zombie, so you maneuver around it and then BAM! Mr. X comes bursting through the wall and you start running in panic.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
You're still not entirely familiar with the RPD map, so you're just running any which way you can trying to escape. Eventually you lose him, and you make your way to the west hallway to use the club key on the final locked door of the first floor. The hallway is now inhabited by lickers, so you slowly walk down the hallway when you realize that since you didn't board up all these windows a few hours ago, zombies have repopulated this hallway. If you shoot them, the lickers will hear you. Things are already pretty tense. You unlock the club key door and pick up a grenade and the very important device that you can take to the library to finally put the shelves together to get access to that upstairs door. But picking up this item triggers Mr. X to appear in the hallway just outside. You see him coming and start to panic again because if you fight him, you'll alert the lickers. You start running, dealing with the zombies ahead of you, opening the double doors to the meeting room, and instinctually you run to the opening at the top of the wall to climb through, dropping you right in front of two lickers. This is it. This is the moment of absolute terror that has been unmatched since the original Silent Hill games more than 20 years ago. A moment of utterly petrifying fear, running for your life as Mr. X is right on your tail, but two of the most terrifying enemies are now right in front of you and react to sound if you run. Two voices are screaming inside of your head. One screams, "Run, you're gonna die," and the other one screams, "If you run, you die." The Resident Evil Remake sold over 10 million copies, so even if just 1/10 of the players experienced this series of events, that's 1 million people, so I know this happened to a lot of you. One of my favorite things I've done in the past year is show RE2 Remake to a close friend who hasn't played a Resident Evil game since RE4, and he played all the PS1 originals. He was so happy to be playing something with the gameplay of the classics. He went down the same path I just described. I saw fear in his face like I'd never seen before when he plopped down in front of the lickers. He completely froze up and didn't know what to do. It was glorious. There's a lot of other well-crafted, tense moments that make the campaign very memorable, and they're given so much dramatic context by the limitations put on the player. Knowing that dying sends you back to your last save, knowing that your ammo is low and using a health item will put you in a bad place for the next boss fight, not knowing if something is going to be waiting for you around the corner as you're backtracking. It makes RE2 Remake a stellar representation of the survival horror genre. Several old mechanics from the classics were surprisingly brought back, and some mechanics have been objectively improved. You can now discard items you don't want to be carrying, instead of having to use them or take them back to a chest. You're able to specify how many of an item you want to take out or put in chests, so you don't have to put excess ink ribbons into the chest after saving, and you can pull out just the amount of bullets you need to fill your clip so you're not left with excess bullets taking up an all-important inventory slot. You're able to instantly combine herbs that you find with herbs in your inventory, so if you don't have the space to pick it up, you can still mix them. The map highlights rooms where there's still something to do, even if it's just that there might be some bullets in there, helping with that frustrating experience of having to go back to every room in the game just to look for something you might have missed when you're lost. RE3's gunpowder mixing makes a welcome return, removing the tedious reloading tool and just letting you mix them freely. And I was super happy to see the return of 3D item interaction, asking you to inspect items that don't have obvious uses. I always loved this mechanic in the original PS1 game and the GameCube remake. I never understood why they removed it for the sequels, it was so cool. Now that it's back, it wonderfully complements RE2 Remake's emphasis on puzzle solving. Pretty quickly, you're presented with a very Resident Evil style puzzle in the West Office. Leon, being a rookie, is the victim of a prank from the other officers. They've locked his desk with 2 combination locks. They've left a note teasing you, explaining how to solve it, and at the end, there's a post-zombie attack addition to the note saying you should be glad you're not here. A light-hearted prank followed by a genuine concern for your safety. See, Leon's fellow officers don't treat him like a loser, constantly talking down to him. They don't yell at him and think he's an idiot. He's not a drunk fuck-up that can't hear an exploding truck across the street just because he's using headphones.
And what the fuck are you doing here, Leon?
You said everyone into the briefing room, so here I am.
I didn't mean you moron!
This puzzle is simple, but putting it together is fun because you're walking around the desks looking at the names of your partners so you can get the codes. You're probably low on ammo already, or if you avoided the zombie outside, he's probably already bursting into the room. And then as you move along the right side desks, a corpse wakes up and now you've got another zombie to deal with. And he's next to a desk where you're really struggling to find the last nameplate because it's not on the desk. So you end up in a panic, looking all on the floor, under the desk, on the chair. It's not that the puzzle is hard logically, it's hard to deal with the immediate dangers around you as you're scrambling trying to find the code you need. It's really good, and when you unlock the desk to get a magazine capacity upgrade for the pistol, it's a satisfying way to introduce the player to the puzzle aspect of this game, and the rewards of engaging with optional puzzles. There's several locked safes around the game, encouraging exploration to find story notes that give the combination, and you can go immediately to unlock them or come across them naturally as you're backtracking to make progress. There's the prison puzzle with the power paths, which is fun to put together and provides a pretty good challenge in the B scenario. RE2 Remake really has the perfect mix of puzzles and combat for a Resident Evil game, in my opinion. That's why, despite the issues I have with character changes, the color desaturation, the lack of music, and the B scenario that's just a shell of its former self, I still think this is one of the greatest survival horror games ever made, if not one of the greatest games period. Judging it solely as a remake, the criticism is totally warranted, but I think it's a huge exaggeration to say it fails as a remake. RE3 Remake fails as a remake because they gutted the level design and removed exploration and puzzles and the persistent threat of the Nemesis, while also butchering the character of Jill Valentine so badly that she's unrecognizable. Again, I have a video on that, you've probably seen it. Resident Evil 2 Remake, with its great sales, stellar reviews, and enthusiastic reception amongst many longtime fans and newcomers, proves the relevance and staying power of classic survival horror gameplay. It does not need to be watered down or turned into a mindless linear cinematic adventure game. When Resident Evil gets it gets it really right, and we deserve to have more mainstream titles experimenting with their own takes on the genre. We've had smaller studios and indie devs putting out titles like Tormented Souls, Nightmare of Decay, Alisa, but survival horror doesn't just have to be an indie niche genre. RE2 Remake shows that it's possible and that the people want it. So I say cheers to Resident Evil 2 Remake for being the perfect representation of how to do a smart, modern survival horror game with enough solid action to keep the common player engaged in the experience. If you haven't played RE2 Remake, you should. If you've never played a survival horror game and you don't know where to start here if you aren't ready to go hardcore, classic, fixed camera tank controls with the RE1 HD remaster, which you absolutely should play because it's the best survival horror game ever made. You'll just have to get used to it first. And if you played RE2 Remake and it rubbed you the wrong way for some reason, I ask that you give it another chance and try to see it from some of these other perspectives because I really think it's a good game. Thanks for watching, it's been a pleasure talking about this game. Resident Evil is one of my favorite series of all time, and having a good entry pop up here and there gives me hope that we'll see another good one someday. Fingers crossed for the RE4 remake.